Hey there, friend. Let's sit with that sound for a moment. Just the crackle of the fire.
Now, imagine a mother standing in the crowded forum. She is weeping silently, watching a golden carriage fade away. Inside that carriage is her little girl, 6 years old. She hasn't been kidnapped. She's just been honored.
They say she won the lottery. She belongs to the goddess Vesta now.
Holding power that even emperors must bow to.
But the price, 30 years of captivity, and one mistake means a living death.
I gotta admit, history talks about glory, but tonight, we're talking about the blood behind the walls. Welcome to The Price of Purity. I'm Anna, and let's find the truth. Pull up a chair, won't you? Imagine we're sitting here by this fireplace in my cabin. The flames are dancing shadows on the walls. The wood pops and hisses, that sharp scent of pine resin filling the air. It's warm against the chill night outside. I've got a story tonight that's been gnawing at me. It starts with a flame, not unlike this one, but oh, it is so much more. It's about the Vestal Virgins of ancient Rome, girls turned into goddesses, keepers of the sacred fire. But as I dug into this, I got to admit, it gave me chills. They call it the purity of Rome, but after tonight, you might call it the theft of innocence. Let's dive in, just you, me, and the embers. Listen, not to me, but to that. Can you hear it? That low roar, like a beast stirring in its sleep? In ancient Rome, inside the temple of Vesta, the fire wasn't just a utility. It was considered a living entity, a goddess breathing in the center of the city. The Romans believed that this flame was Rome. Literally, if the fire goes out, the city falls. Think about the physics. No matches, just wood and air. Have you ever tried to keep a campfire going all night? You stare at it. You watch the wick sputter. Now stretch that anxiety over 1,000 years. Imagine standing inside that temple. It's circular, like the earth. The air smells of sulfur, ash, and expensive incense. And there in the center is the hearth. It's a hungry beast. It demands feeding 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And who feeds it? Not strong men, not soldiers, but 6 young women, or rather, girls. If the fire went out, it wasn't treated as an accident. It was a crime, a sign that the virgin watching it was impure. The punishment? The Pontifex Maximus, the high priest, would take the girl aside. He would strip her down, and in the dark, he would whip her, not just to punish her, but to beat the evil out of her until her skin bled.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How did they sleep? Did they wake up in a cold sweat, dreaming of a cold hearth? The mental load, the sheer psychological pressure on a teenager, it's suffocating.
But how did they get there? You might think, wow, being a priestess? That sounds like a great job.
VIP seats, jewelry, fame. Well, it wasn't a job application. It was a lottery, a doom lottery. Let's go back to a warm afternoon in Rome. The year is, say, 100 AD. The high priest announces a vacancy. A Vestal has died or retired after 30 years. Rome needs a new angel. He doesn't ask for volunteers. He invokes the Lex Papia. He demands a list, 20 names, 20 girls from the most aristocratic families in Rome. Age requirement, between 6 and 10 years old.
Sharp, cynical. 6 years old. Think about the 6-year-olds you know. They are playing with dolls. They are learning to tie their sandals. They are scared of the dark. These were the candidates. The criteria for selection were brutal. It was unparalleled perfectionism. Number 1, both parents must be living. If your dad died in a war, you're out. Why? Because you need to be severed from a living family to join the state. Number 2, no physical blemishes, no scars, no hearing loss, no speech impediments. I found this detail in the archives that really struck me. They even checked their tongues. If a girl stuttered, disqualified, because a Vestal must recite prayers perfectly. A stutter could doom the empire. Imagine the atmosphere in those 20 noble houses that night. The air is thick with incense, fathers are pacing, mothers are conflicted. On one hand, it's the ultimate honor. Your daughter becomes a demigod. On the other hand, you lose her completely. I try to picture the mother. Let's call her Claudia. She's brushing her daughter's hair, that long, beautiful hair that she's grown for 6 years. She knows that if her daughter's name is drawn tomorrow, that hair will be cut off. She's memorizing the sound of her child laugh, because once she enters the atrium vestae, she belongs to the fire. It's a strange kind of grief, isn't it? Grieving for someone who is still alive, someone who is being promoted to a place you can't follow. And then, the morning comes. The selection happens. And out of 20 terrified little girls, 19 go home. 1 stays. 1 is captured. And then it happens. The moment the air leaves the room. We call it a selection. But the Romans, they had a more honest word for it. Captio, to capture, like a prisoner of war, like an animal in a hunt. Imagine the scene. The Pontifex Maximus steps forward. He isn't just a priest. He is the most powerful man in Rome, the bridge between the gods and men. He walks past the line of shivering girls. He doesn't smile. He stops in front of one. Let's call her Amelia. He doesn't ask her parents for permission. He doesn't ask Amelia if she wants to serve. He reaches out, his hand heavy and cold, and grips her arm, not gently, possessively. And he speaks the ancient formula, words that seal her fate instantly. Te amata capiao. I take you, beloved.
Beloved. Such a sweet word for such a violent act, don't you think? At that moment, Legally, Emilia ceases to be a citizen. She ceases to be a daughter. She is no longer under the potestas, the authority of her father. She is now the property of the state. And then comes the part that history books often gloss over, but it makes my stomach turn. The hair cutting. They didn't just trim it, they sheared it. Imagine being 6 years old. Your hair is your vanity, your identity. And right there, in front of the crowd, they take a knife, or sometimes bronze shears, and hack it off. Snip, snip, chunks of childhood falling to the gray stones. But they don't throw it away. Oh no! They take those locks and hang them on an ancient lotus tree in the forum, a sacrifice of her past self.
Why? Why capture? Why the violence? Some historians say it's because the original Vestals were captured from enemy tribes. Others say it's a legal loophole. To free her from her father, she had to be stolen by the gods. But standing here by my fire, I have a different theory. I think they wanted to break them. They wanted to terrify them right at the start, so that there was no room left for rebellion, only duty. The ceremony ends. The crowds disperse. The sun sets over the Palatine Hill, and for the first time, she enters the Atrium Vestae, the House of the Vestals. It is a palace. Let's be clear about that. It is one of the most luxurious buildings in Rome, 3 stories high, heated floors, private baths, a garden filled with roses and statues. But to a 6-year-old girl who just lost her mother, it's not a palace, it's a tomb. She is led to her room. She is introduced to the older Vestals, the Maxima. These women have been here for 20, 30 years. Their faces are hardened by duty. They look at her not with warmth, but with expectation. Don't let the fire die, or you die. I imagine her lying on her pallet that first night. The silence is absolute, except for the crackle of the sacred hearth down the hall. Does she cry? Probably. But she cries quietly, because she knows now. She knows the secret that the cheering crowds outside don't understand.
She has traded her freedom for power. She has traded love for worship. She is the guardian of Rome's soul, but she has just lost her own. But this was just the beginning. The luxury, the robes, the VIP seats, it was all a golden cage. And cages have a funny way of making people do desperate things. What happens when a Vestal wants to break out? What happens when the beloved wants to love someone else? Well, Rome had a special place for them. A place underground. A place without light. And next time, we're going there. I'm Anna. This is The Hidden Truth. Keep your fire burning.
Darkness, absolute heavy darkness. Can you imagine a silence so loud it hurts your ears? Imagine sitting in a room no bigger than a closet. You are 20 feet underground. Above you, there is tons of earth.
And above that earth is the busy city of Rome, forgetting you ever existed. You have a loaf of bread, a jug of water, a small oil lamp, and you are waiting, not for rescue, but for the air to run out.
Hey there, friend. Welcome back to the fire. Last time, we talked about how the Vestal Virgins were chosen, how they were captured into a life of luxury. But tonight we have to talk about the price of that luxury.
Serious, ominous. We are going to talk about the most terrifying punishment in the ancient world, a punishment designed not just to kill, but to erase. I'm Anna, and this is the nightmare of the Campus Scileratus. To understand the punishment, we have to understand the crime. The Romans had a word for it, incestum. Now, it sounds like incest, right? And in a way, it was, because a Vestal was the daughter of Rome. Any man she slept with was her brother.
Any intimate touch was a violation of the family. But incestum meant more than just sex. It meant spiritual pollution. It meant the wall between the sacred and the profane had been breached. Here is the hidden truth that really chills me. Most of the time, these accusations didn't happen because a girl was actually caught with a lover. No, they happened because Rome was losing. Think about it. A plague hits the city? Blame the Vestal. Rome loses a battle against the Gauls? The fire must be impure. Blame the Vestal. They were the ultimate scapegoats. When the empire bled, the Vestals paid the price. Imagine being innocent. Imagine serving faithfully for 10 years. But because a general lost a war 500 miles away, soldiers are banging on your door to arrest you. How did they prove it? There were no cameras, no DNA tests, so they used the Roman method, torture. But here is the twist. They couldn't torture the Vestal. Her body was sacred. Touching her was a death sentence. So they tortured her slaves.
They would drag the women who served her friends, really, into the dungeon, and they would break them until they said what the high priest wanted to hear. Yes, she did it. She met a man. Can you imagine the guilt? Listening to your friends scream, knowing they are suffering because of you. And once the confession was signed, the trial was over. The verdict was always the same: death. But you can't just execute a Vestal Virgin. You can't strangle her. You can't behead her. You can't spill her sacred blood. So the Romans, in their twisted brilliance, found a loophole. They wouldn't kill her. They would let nature do it.
The day of execution. Rome is usually a noisy city, shouting merchants, rattling carts. But on this day, silence. A procession moves through the forum, but it's not a celebration, it's a funeral. But the corpse is alive. The Vestal is stripped of her white ribbons, her badges of office. She is bound and gagged with leather straps so she cannot curse the city. She is placed inside a covered hearse.
Even now, they are afraid to look at her. The high priest leads the way. He walks her to a place near the Colline Gate, a place with a terrible name: Campus Scileratus,
the field of wickedness. When they arrive, the priest raises his hands to the heavens. He says a prayer, essentially washing his hands of the guilt. Then he opens the hearse, and there she is. Maybe she's crying. Maybe she's catatonic with fear. She sees the hole in the ground. She sees the ladder leading down into the blackness. They untie her bonds. Why? Because she must walk down the ladder herself. They force her to choose be pushed or walk into your own grave.
She takes a step, then another. The sunlight disappears, the sounds of the city fade. She steps onto the cold earthen floor of the chamber, and then she looks up, and she sees the ladder being pulled up. The light shrinks. A rectangle of sky becomes a sliver, then nothing. Just the sound of dirt hitting the roof. Tons and tons of earth sealing her in.
But wait, inside that tomb, they left her something. A loaf of bread, a jug of water, a little milk, a lamp. Was it mercy? No, it was the ultimate hypocrisy. They left her food so they could say, "We didn't starve her. If Vesta wants to save her, she can perform a miracle." She sits there, eating her last meal in the flickering light of a lamp that will soon run out of oil, waiting for the darkness to become absolute.
But the real question, the hidden truth we need to uncover tonight, is why. You might think, well, they broke their vows. They deserved it according to their laws. But did they? When you line up the dates of these executions with the timeline of Roman history, a terrifying pattern emerges. It wasn't about sex. It was about scapegoating. Let's look at the year 216 BC. This was the darkest year in Roman history. Hannibal, the great Carthaginian general, had just crushed the Roman army at Cannae. 50,000 Roman soldiers dead in one day. Panic swept the streets. The people thought the world was ending. They needed an answer. Why did the gods abandon us? They didn't blame the generals for bad tactics. No, they looked at the temple of Vesta. Two Vestals, Opimia and Floronia, were suddenly accused of incestum. Think about the timing. Is it a coincidence, or did the Senate need a human sacrifice to calm a terrified population? The gods are angry because the fire is impure. Kill the virgins and we will win the war. It was political theater written in blood. Opimia was buried alive. Rome washed its hands in her blood, and suddenly, they felt safe again. It makes you angry, doesn't it? These women were the daughters of Rome, but the moment Rome got scared, they became the first casualties. But if Opimia was a political sacrifice, the story of Minutia is even more disturbing. It hits closer to home. Her execution happened in 337 BC, and the evidence against her? It wasn't a lover, it wasn't a witness, it was her style.
Livy, the historian, tells us that Minutia was accused because of her love of dress. She dressed a little too nicely. She smiled a little too much. She was described as having a livelier spirit than was proper for a Vestal. That was it. That was the proof. Because she didn't act like a repressed statue, they assumed she must have a lover. Let's sit with that. A woman condemned to a horrific death because she liked fashion, because she was too much. Does that sound familiar? How often do we judge women today based on what they wear? Minutia was buried alive, not because she sinned, but because she dared to be an individual inside a system that demanded conformity. Let's go back to the chamber. The stone has covered the entrance. The footsteps above have faded. It's just you and the lamp. I've tried to imagine those final hours. The air begins to grow stale. The headache sets in. But the worst part isn't the suffocation. It's the lamp.
You know the oil is running out. You watch the flame get smaller and smaller. You know that when it goes out, you will die in absolute darkness. Did they scream? Did they pray to Vesta? Or did they curse the city that betrayed them? We will never know. Their screams were swallowed by the earth. But not every Vestal accepted this fate. Not every woman went quietly into the dark. Some fought back. Some performed miracles that defied the laws of nature. Next time on The Hidden Truth, we are going to meet the survivors. We are going to meet Tukia, the woman who carried water in a sieve. We're going to meet the heroes. Because you can bury a woman, but you can't bury the truth. I'm Anna. Sleep well, if you can.
Take a breath with me, friend. Deep breath in and out. We've spent a lot of time in the dark recently. We've been in the cold atrium. We've been in the underground chamber. It's been heavy. But tonight we are stepping back into the light. Because here's the thing about the Vestal Virgins. They weren't just victims, and they weren't just prisoners. Some of them were fighters. History has tried to bury them, literally. But there are stories that survived. Stories of women who stood in front of the entire Roman Senate and said, "You think I'm weak? Watch this." Tonight, we are going to talk about the impossible. We are going to talk about magic. I'm Anna, and this is the story of the ones who fought back. The year is 230 BC. Meet Tukia. Like many before her, she was accused of incestum. A man had looked at her the wrong way, rumors started flying, and suddenly she was facing the death sentence. The underground chamber was waiting. But Tukia didn't cry, she didn't beg, she did something insane. She looked at the high priestess and said, "I will prove my innocence, not with words, but with the Tiber River." She walked down to the riverbank. The whole city was watching, waiting for her to fail. She picked up a sieve. You know, a colander, the thing you use to drain pasta. It has holes in it. It cannot hold water. Physics says no. Tukia knelt by the river. She prayed, "Vesta, if my hands are pure, let me carry this water to your temple." She lifted it up. The water didn't leak, not a drop. The crowd went silent. Tukia stood up. She walked all the way from the Tiber to the Temple of Vesta in the Forum. That's a long walk, folks, carrying a sieve full of water. She poured it out at the feet of the high priest, and just like that, the charges were dropped.
Now, the skeptic in me asks, how? Was it a trick? Did she use oil to seal the holes? Or was it a mass hallucination? Or is there a hidden truth here about confidence? Maybe her conviction was so terrifyingly absolute that the priests were too scared to execute her. Either way, Tukia became a legend. She proved that a woman's purity could bend the laws of physics.
But if Tuicia's story feels like magic, the story of Claudia Quinta feels like an action movie. Fast forward to 204 BC. Remember Minuccia from the last episode, the one killed for dressing too nicely? Claudia Quinta had the same problem. She was flashy, she wore heavy makeup, she talked back to men. Everyone whispered, she's not a virgin, she's a fake.
Nothing. Then came the test. Rome was importing a new goddess, Cybele, the Magna Mater, from Turkey. Her statue was arriving on a massive ship. But as the ship entered the Tiber, disaster. It got stuck in the mud. The strongest men in Rome pulled the ropes. Nothing. Oxen were brought in. Nothing. The ship wouldn't budge. The soothsayers panicked. The goddess refuses to enter Rome. Someone here is impure. All eyes turned to Claudia, the fashionable girl, the suspect.
Claudia stepped forward. She didn't strip off her flashy clothes. She adjusted her belt. She knelt and prayed, "Magna Mater, if I am chaste, follow me." She untied her sash, her belt, and tied it to the ship's heavy rope. She didn't heave, she didn't strain, she just walked. And the massive ship followed her like a puppy on a leash. Imagine the faces of those senators, the men who judged her for her makeup, for her attitude. They just watched a frivolous girl tow a battleship with her belt. This wasn't just a miracle. This was a public statement. Claudia was saying, "My power doesn't come from your rules. It comes from me." I love these stories, not because I necessarily believe in magic sieves or super strength belts, but because they show us a different side of the Vestals. They weren't just victims waiting to be buried. They were capable of staging incredible theatrical moments to save their own lives.
Miracles are great. Walking on water, moving ships. It makes for a good story. But you know what is more powerful than magic? While the men of Rome were out fighting wars, the Vestal Virgins were quietly building something else. A network of secrets. They weren't just nuns, they were the Swiss bank of the ancient world.
Let me introduce you to a woman named Osea. You won't find her in many movies, but in history, she was a titan. Most Vestals served their 30 years and left. They got married, enjoyed their wealth. Not Osea. She served for 57 years. 57 years! From the age of 6 until she was an old woman of 63, she presided over the fire. She saw the Republic fall. She saw the empire rise. She saw dictators come and go. And through it all, she stood there, unmovable. Tacitus, the great historian, wrote about her with absolute reverence. He called her life a model of sanctity. But read between the lines. You don't survive 57 years in Roman politics just by being holy. You survive by being smart. You survive by being dangerous. Why were they so untouchable? Here is the hidden truth: the wills. The Temple of Vesta was built like a fortress, thick walls, sacred ground. No man, not even the police, could enter the inner sanctum. So, where did the most powerful men in Rome hide their wills? Right there, with the virgins.
If you want it, Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, Emperor Augustus, they all gave their last will and testament to the Vestals for safekeeping. They knew who the next emperor would be before anyone else.
They held the literal future of the empire in their hands. When Augustus fought Mark Antony, he did something illegal. He forced the Vestals to hand over Mark Antony's will. They refused. They stood in the doorway and told the future emperor of Rome, "If you want it, you'll have to break in and take it. We won't give it to you." That takes guts.
But their greatest act of power? It wasn't hiding a document, it was saving a life. And not just any life. Go back to the year 80 BC. A young man, barely 20 years old, is on the run. The dictator Sulla wants him dead. Sulla is purging his enemies, and this kid is top of the list. The kid's name? Julius Caesar. He was captured. He was set to executed, and then the Vestals stepped in. They marched to Sulla's palace. They used their sacred status to demand a pardon. Sulla was a butcher. He killed thousands, but he couldn't say no to the Vestals. He grumbled. He warned them, "Fine, I grant you this, but know this, the man you desire to save will one day destroy the Republic."
He was right. But that's not the point. The point is, without the Vestal Virgins, Julius Caesar dies at age 20. No Caesar, no empire, no Western history as we know it. These women didn't just watch history, they wrote it. Tuscia, Claudia, Accia, they were the golden generation. They proved that purity wasn't about weakness, it was about unbreakable strength. But power paints a target on your back. As Rome moved from the Republic to the Empire, the emperors started to get jealous. They didn't want rivals. They didn't want women who could say no. The Golden Age was ending. A new dynasty was rising. The Julio-Claudians, Nero, Caligula, madmen, and they looked at the fire not with reverence, but with suspicion. Next time on The Hidden Truth, the walls began to crumble. We're going to talk about the monster named Nero and the virgin he raped. The fall has begun. I'm Anna. Stay safe out there. Hey there, friend. The fire is still burning, but look closely. It's flickering. The smoke is getting blacker. We talked about the Golden Age. We talked about Vestals staring down dictators and saving lives. But history has a cruel rule. What goes up must come down. And for Rome, the fall was ugly. The Republic died. The Empire was born. And with it came a new breed of leaders. Men who didn't just serve the gods. They thought they were gods.
Caligula, Nero, Domitian. To them, the Vestal Virgins weren't holy priestesses. They were trophies. They were toys. Tonight, we are going to talk about what happens when absolute power meets absolute madness. I'm Anna, and this is the violation of Vesta.
Let's start with Caligula, the mad boy king. Before him, Vestals were isolated. No man could eat with them. No man could sit with them. Caligula? He didn't care about rules.
He invited the Vestals to his banquets. Imagine the scene. These women, who have lived in silence and prayer, are suddenly dragged into the emperor's palace. Around them, people are drunk. There is debauchery, naked dancers, gluttony. And the Vestals are forced to sit there, in their white robes, like ornaments. It wasn't just disrespectful, it was a power move. Caligula was saying, "Your holiness means nothing to me. I own you." Warning tone, very serious. But Caligula was just a disrespectful brat. The next one, Nero, was a monster. We need to talk about a specific name, a name erased from most monuments. Rubria. She was a Vestal Virgin during the reign of Nero. You know Nero, the guy who played the fiddle while Rome burned? Yeah, him. Nero was obsessed with breaking taboos. He wanted to do the one thing that no man in history had ever dared to do. He wanted to possess a Vestal. According to the historian, Suetonius committed the ultimate sacrilege. He raped Rubria. Let's pause. The penalty for touching a Vestal is death. Bip, bam, buried alive. But who punishes the emperor? Who buries him alive? No one. Nero did it because he could. He did it to prove that he was above the gods. And poor Rubria? What could she do? If she spoke up, she would be accused of incestum and buried alive to cover Nero's crime. So she had to live with it. She had to return to the temple, tend the sacred fire, knowing she was impure, carrying the trauma of the man who claimed to be the father of the country. This is the hidden truth that breaks my heart. The system wasn't designed to protect these women. It was designed to protect the idea of them. When the reality became inconvenient, the women were sacrificed.
Rubria is impure. And then came the fire, the Great Fire of Rome, 64 AD. The Temple of Vesta burned down. The sacred fire that had burned for centuries went out. Nero blamed the Christians, but whispers in the streets blamed Nero. And deeper whispers, they blamed the Vestals. The fire went out because the virgins are corrupt. Rubria is impure. See the pattern? The victim gets blamed. Nero died, the fire was put out, but the smoke lingered.
Enter Emperor Domitian. He wasn't a drunkard like Caligula. He wasn't a rock star like Nero. He was worse. He was a Puritan. He wanted to make Rome great again by restoring ancient morals. He cracked down on corruption. He cracked down on adultery. But here is the hidden truth. Domitian was sleeping with his own niece. He was the ultimate hypocrite. And like all hypocrites, he needed a distraction to hide his own sins. He needed a witch hunt. Cornelia was the Vestalis Maxima, the chief Vestal. She was old, dignified, and respected by everyone. Domitian accused her of incestum. He didn't allow her to speak. He didn't allow her to face her accusers. He condemned her to be buried alive. Imagine the arrogance. He wanted to bury the holiest woman in Rome to prove he was holy. Cornelia raised her hands to the gods and said, "How can Caesar say I am impure when he has conquered enemies and won wars while I performed the sacrifices?" It didn't matter. The verdict was signed.
The Execution Day, 91 AD. Cornelia is led to the ladder. The hole is waiting. But what happened next is something history has never forgotten. Pliny the Younger wrote about it, and I can feel his awe in the text. As Cornelia stepped down the ladder into her grave, her dress, her stola, caught on a rough stone step. It snagged. Now, you're about to be buried alive. You're about to die in darkness. Most people would be screaming. Most people would collapse. Not Cornelia.
She stopped. She turned. With absolute calm, she reached down and unhooked her dress. She smoothed out the fabric. She wanted to enter her grave looking perfect, like a queen. The executioner, a rough soldier, saw her stumble slightly and reached out his hand to help her. Cornelia pulled back. She recoiled in horror. She refused to let him touch her. Even in her final seconds, she protected her sanctity. She would not let a man's hand defile her.
She walked down into the dark. She laid down on the bed, and she died without saying a word. This wasn't just a death. It was a victory. She denied Domitian the satisfaction of seeing her break.
Cornelia's death sent a shockwave through Rome. People started to ask, if the emperor can kill the Vestals, then are the Vestals really sacred? The spell was broken. The fire was still burning, but the belief was turning to ash. And in the shadows of the city, a new group of people was watching. They didn't worship the fire. They didn't worship the emperor. They worshipped a man who died on a cross. The Vestals had survived wars, plagues, and mad emperors, but they were about to face their greatest enemy yet, a new god. Next time, on The Hidden Truth, the fire goes out forever. I'm Anna. Keep your lights on.
Hey there. Thanks for staying with me. You know, Ernest Hemingway once wrote about how bankruptcy happens. Gradually, then suddenly. The fall of the Vestal Virgins was just like that. For 1,000 years, they were the center of the universe. And then, the world changed.
A new voice was whispering in the streets of Rome, a voice that didn't care about the sacred fire, a voice that worshipped a different kind of sacrifice. The cross was rising, and the flame was trembling. Tonight, we watch the lights go out. I'm Anna, and this is the end of an era. It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow strangulation. In the 4th century, Rome officially became Christian. Suddenly, the Vestal Virgins weren't holy priestesses anymore. They were branded as pagans, witches, demons. Imagine being a Vestal Virgin in the year 380 AD. You walk down the street. People used to bow to you. Now, they spit on the ground. They make the sign of the cross to protect themselves from you. The privileges? Gone. The VIP seats? Gone. The funding? Cut. It must have been terrifying, not because they feared death, but because they feared irrelevance. To be forgotten is a fate worse than death. The date was 394 AD. Emperor Theodosius I, a devout Christian, signed the decree. All pagan rituals were banned. The eternal fire of Vesta was illegal. I want you to picture the scene. Soldiers marching into the Atrium Vestae, not to protect it, but to shut it down.
They entered the inner sanctum. They saw the fire that had burned for 1,000 years, the fire that survived the Gauls, the fires of Nero, the civil wars. And they put it out. Maybe they threw water on it, maybe they just kicked the logs apart. It doesn't matter how. What matters is the silence that followed. For the first time in a millennium, the heart of Rome stopped beating. The remaining Vestals were evicted, thrown out onto the street. Think about the last high priestess. Let's call her Coelia. She stands outside the locked doors of her home. She is old. She has no family. She has no money. She has no God. She is just a ghost in a city that moved on. But you know what they say about ghosts. They haunt.
But legends don't die quietly. Let me tell you the story of Serena. She wasn't just anyone. She was the niece of the Emperor Theodosius and the wife of Stilicho, the most powerful general in Rome. She was a devout Christian, wealthy, and arrogant. She wanted to see the inside of the famous Temple of Vesta, not to pray, but to gloat.
Serena walked into the ruined temple. She looked around at the cold hearth, the dust gathering on the sacred objects. Then she saw it. A statue of the Great Mother, or perhaps Rhea Silvia, the first Vestal. Around the statue's neck was a magnificent necklace of pearls and gold, an offering from centuries ago. To a Vestal, that necklace was holy. To Serena, it was just jewelry, and she wanted it.
She reached up, unclasped the necklace, and put it around her own neck. She looked in a mirror, admiring how good it looked. It was the ultimate act of disrespect. She was literally looting the gods.
But she wasn't alone. Out of the shadows stepped an old woman. Some say she was the last Vestalis Maxima, the last survivor who refused to leave her post. She was frail, dressed in rags, her eyes burning with rage. She didn't attack Serena physically. She attacked her with words. She screamed a curse so vile, so terrifying, that even Serena's guards stepped back.
The old woman pointed a trembling finger at Serena's throat, right where the necklace lay, and prophesied. Because you have touched what is sacred, you will pay with your neck. You, your husband, and your children will suffer a fate worse than death. Serena laughed. She ordered her guards to kick the old woman out. She walked away, the necklace glittering on her chest. She thought she had won. But history has a way of settling scores.
Fast forward a few years. Rome is under siege by the Goths. The city is starving. Paranoia is everywhere. The Roman Senate needs someone to blame. They accuse Serena of treason. They say she is conspiring with the barbarians. The punishment? Execution by strangulation. As the executioner placed the cord around her neck, the very same neck that had worn the stolen necklace, did she remember the old woman's curse? Did she feel the weight of the pearls turning into a noose? Her husband, Stilicho, beheaded. her son killed. The curse was fulfilled to the letter. Now, I'm a rational person. Maybe it was just politics. Maybe it was a coincidence. But it sends a chill down my spine. It was the last gasp of the old gods, a final reminder that you can destroy a temple, you can put out a fire, but you cannot mock the past without consequences. The Vestals died. Their fire died. But did they really disappear? Look closely at the world around you. Look at the nuns in their convents, living in seclusion, married to God. Look at the eternal flame at the tomb of the unknown soldier. They are still here, hiding in plain sight. Next time, in our final episode, we are going to walk through the ruins of the Forum today. We're going to dig up the final secrets, and we're going to answer the biggest question of all. Was it worth it? I'm Anna, and the fire never truly dies. Hey there, friend. I want you to join me on a trip. Right now, I'm standing in the middle of the Roman Forum. It's 2024. The sun is hot, tourists are everywhere, taking selfies with broken columns.
But if you walk past the big temples, past the crowds, you find a garden. It's quiet here. There are rose bushes. There are statues of women lining the path. This is the Atrium Vestae, the home of the Vestal Virgins.
For 5 episodes, we've lived in their past. We've seen them captured, honored, buried alive, and exiled. But standing here today, looking at these headless statues, I have one final question. Who were they really? I'm Anna, and in this final episode, we are going to dig up the last secret, a secret that Rome tried to erase, but couldn't.
As you walk down the line of statues in the garden, you see names carved into the stone bases. Flavia Publicia, Coelia Concordia, great high priestesses. But then, you stop at a statue from the year 364 AD. The statue is gone. Only the base remains, and the name has been chiseled out.
The Romans called this damnatio memoriae, damnation of memory. It was the ultimate punishment, worse than death. It meant erasing your soul from history. Why? Who was she?
Hopeful, inspiring. Some historians think she was a Vestal who converted to Christianity. Others think she fell in love and ran away. But I like to think maybe she was the one who finally said, no. Maybe she looked at the fire, looked at the rules, and decided that her life belonged to her, not to the state.
Rome erased her name, but in doing so, they made her immortal. She is the unknown Vestal, the symbol of every woman who was silenced by history. The fire went out in 394 AD. We know that. But did the Vestals really disappear? Look around you today. When the Catholic Church rose to power, they needed a model for holy women. They needed women who took vows of chastity, who lived in seclusion, who wore veils, and who dedicated their lives to the divine. Does that sound familiar?
The Vestal Virgins didn't die. They transformed. Their DNA is woven into the fabric of the Western world. Every time you see a perpetual flame at a war memorial, that's Vesta. Every time we talk about the sanctity of the home, that's Vesta. They taught us that some things are worth protecting, even if it costs you everything.
Let's go back to the beginning. Remember the 6-year-old girl in the carriage? The one crying for her mother? For a long time, I felt sorry for her. I thought her life was a tragedy, and in many ways it was. To be a pawn in a political game is a terrible fate.
But after researching their stories, Tucha holding the sieve, Osea staring down emperors, Cornelia dying with dignity, I realized something. They weren't just pawns. They were queens. They took a cage and turned it into a throne. The price of purity was high. It cost them their freedom. It cost some of them their lives. But they paid it. And in return, they held the world together for 1,000 years. So the next time you light a candle, take a second, watch the flame, and remember the women who kept it burning in the dark. I'm Anna. Thank you for listening to The Hidden Truth. The fire is yours now. Keep it lit.